Namaste. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Punaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Pronouns to Aku Ma Swamiji and pronouns to Swami Medhanandaji Maharaj and who are with us today. And namaste to everybody. And today's program starting right on time, a couple of minutes late. And so just a very high level. There will be an invocation hymn with Ganesh Bhajan that will be singing, and followed by the BBCC choir program that Doladi will lead. Then there will be a short welcome note to Swamiji. Then Swami will give a give a lecture on a new book he's releasing. I will cover more in detail a little bit. Then followed by that, there will be an interactive Q&A with Swami. Then followed that, there will be there are some limited copies of the books available here today, and Swami is the author of this book, and Swami will sign the book, and whoever is interested, that is, they can buy the books here. And followed by that, we will have lunch, and after the lunch, we will be adjourning for the day. So please stay silent, and that is have a divine and blissful day. With that, that is, let me start the invocation. Yeah, just one moment. It's a very short 4 lines Ganesh Bhajan. Gauri Sutaya Om Namo. Gauri Sutaya Om Namo. Lambodharaya Om Namo. Lambodharaya Om Namo. Gauri Sutaya Om Namo. Vigneshwaraya Om Namo. Vigneshwaraya Om Namo. Bhavadukha Bhanjana Om Namo. Bhavadukha Bhanjana Om Namo. Gauri Sutaya Om Namo. Now I would request Janadi to get started with the fire program.
Thank you, Mani. Welcome to all of you. Today's choir program is on Matri Bandhana. For the past 1.5 months, we have celebrated Durga Puja, Kali Puja, Jagadhatri Puja. As we all know, this is the same Divine Mother in different forms who has come to us to conquer the evil, give us strength and courage to fight corruption, and most important of all, with the message of unity and love for everyone. There is a saying that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. It is the uniqueness of our religion that we recognized the power of Mother, and we worship them, the divine power in the form of Mother. And so today's choir program is really praising this divine Mother. Hope you all enjoy. অনন্ত রূপিণী অনন্ত গুণবতী অনন্ত নামী গিরি দেবা অনন্ত রূপিণী অনন্ত গুণবতী অনন্ত নামী
Just take the camera picture because I'm expecting. Just say
आधारभूते चाधे प्रीति रूपे धुरंधरे रूपे ध्रुवपदे धीरे जगद्धात्री नमस्ते आधारभूते चाधे प्रीति रूपे धुरंधरे रूपे ध्रुवपदे धीरे जगद्धात्री नमस्ते क्षमाकारे शक्ति रूपे शक्ति शक्तिनीतये साक्षात्कारी देवी जगद्धात्री नमस्ते जय दे जगदानंदे जगदेक प्रपूजिते जय सर्वगते दुर्गे जगद्धात्री नमस्ते परमाणुस्वरूपे च जरूपाधि स्वरूपिणी पुरादिसूक्ष्मरूपे च जगद्धात्री नमस्ते सूक्ष्मादिसूक्ष्मरूपे च प्राणापानविशक्तिनी भावस्वरूपे च जगद्धात्री नमस्ते महाविघ्ने महासाये महामाये वरप्रदे प्रपञ्चसारे सतीशे जगद्धात्री नमस्तुते गौरी जगन्नाथे माहेश्वरी वराङ्गने अशेष रूपे रूपस्ते जगद्धात्री नमस्ते त्रिसप्तकोटि मन्त्राणां शक्तिरूपे सनातनी सर्वशक्ति स्वरूपे जगद्धात्री नमस्तुते जगन्मयी त्वमेव सर्वं सर्वं जगद्धात्री नमस्ते তোর নামেরই কবর তোলে তোলে আমার বুকে এসো করি তোর নামেরই কবর তোলে কি ভয় দেখার আমি করে ভয় করে ভয় করে না ভয় করে তোর নামেরই কবর তোলে মৃত্যু কোলায় তাদের লাগি রয় যারা অনুরাগে তোর শ্রীচরণ আশ্রয় মাগো তোর শ্রীচরণ আশ্রয় দেখে মরণ আছে ভয়ে মরি বাবুর নামেরে কবর তোলে তোর যদি মা নাই তুমি নাই আমিও মা অবিনাশী তোরি কোলে তোমায় লাগি তোরি কোলে কাঁদি হাসি তোর চরণ ছেড়ে পালাই যাবো তোর চরণ ছেড়ে পালাই যাবো মায়ার জালে তোরে তোর মায়া জাল এড়িয়ে না তোরা ভয় চরণ ধরে তোর নামেরই কবর তোলে তোলে আমার বুকে এসো করি তোর নামেরই কবর তোলে রণবেশে হেসে হেসে ওই বাবা এসেছে পরেশি পদে শশী চিরুপসী সেজেছে রণবেশে হেসে হেসে ওই বাবা এসেছে পরেশি পদে শশী চিরুপসী সেজেছে আয়নে আনন গানে রসির জনে গানে আয়নে আনন গানে রসির জনে গানে দলিতে তনু জোলালে ঢলে ঢলে চলেছে দলিতে তনু জোলালে ঢলে ঢলে চলেছে দলিতে তনু দলিতে তনু জোলালে ঢলে ঢলে চলেছে রণবেশে হেসে হেসে ওই বাবা এসেছে পরেশি পদে শশী চিরুপসী সেজেছে সব যন্ত্রণায় সব যন্ত্রণায় শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে, 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 মগ্ন হয়ে রে মনো, তুমি মগ্ন হয়ে রে মনো, সব যন্ত্রণায় শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে, শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে, শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে, শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে। সংসার মিছে মিছে তুমি তাড়াবে, হে দিন সংসার মিছে মিছে তুমি তাড়াবে, কুণ্ডলিনী ব্রহ্মময়ী, কুণ্ডলিনী ব্রহ্মময়ী, অন্তরে ধিয়াবে, শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে, শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে, শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে, শঙ্করী চরণে মনোমগ্ন হয়ে রে। কমলাকান্তের বাণী শ্যামা মায়ের That concludes our program for today.
Thank you, Doladi and the choir members, such vibrating divine songs. It always echoes in my mind all the times. Thank you. And, next, we are getting ready with Swami's session. And before I invite Swami to give the lecture, I want to make a brief introduction about Swami. And Swami has been coming here, at least I believe this is the third time, I believe, Swami over the last 2-3 years. And frequently he is visiting us. And today we are extremely glad to have Swami with us. So about a brief introduction about Swami. Swami Medhanandaji Maharaj is a monk of the Ramakrishna order, currently serving as a senior research fellow in philosophy at the Vedanta Society of Southern California in Hollywood. His current research focuses on global philosophy of religion and especially the Vedantic philosophies of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, and Sri Aurobindo, among many others. He is also the Hindu chaplain at University of California, Los Angeles, and also the University of Southern California. Swami received his spiritual initiation from Swami Swahananda and joined the Ramakrishna order in 2010. He received his sannyasa in 2020. During these about 15 plus years, Swami served as associate professor and head of the program in philosophy at the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute at Belur. He is the author of 3 books, and possibly, I believe today it's the 4th book, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Swami, in religion, Vedantic and philosophies published by Oxford University and Bloomsbury Presses, and editor of several international journals and published over 30 articles in these fields. He is currently working on 3 more books with Oxford and Cambridge University Presses. He has been invited to lecture at most prestigious universities in the world, including Harvard, Princeton, Oxford, University of Edinburgh, and the Indian Institute of Advanced Study. And you can know more about Swami, his research, and his teachings at his website at swamimedhananda.com. And just for today's session, Swami will be talking on the book he has just released, that is on karma and rebirth in Hinduism. As I said before, we are blessed to have, that is today, that is a few copies of this book, and Swami being with us, he will be very happy to sign and release the books to, that is the people who are interested. And again, I'm not sure how many copies are there, but we have limited copies. Please stop by, that is after this session, there will be Q&A, and followed by that, there will be book signing function. So please stay and, that is get Swami's blessings signed and take the books. And with this brief introduction, on behalf of PBCC, I welcome Swami to give his discourse. And thank you all. Welcome. Yes. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupam Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namah. Om Vasamsi Jidnani Yatha Vihaya Navani Ghrannati Naroparani Tatha Sharirani Vihaya Jidnani Anyani Sanyati Navani Dehi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 22. As a person casts off worn-out clothes and puts on a new set of clothes, likewise, at the time of death, the soul casts off its worn-out body and puts on a new one. Good morning, everyone. Namaste. It's a pleasure to be back here in Connecticut for the third time, I believe. I've been coming, I think, once every year so far. And my thank you to the Vedanta Society of Connecticut for inviting me, Devashish Ji for organizing everything, and everybody else for their hard work. Beautiful choir, I love the singing. And I'm always delighted when I hear some new songs. I heard many new songs today for Divine Mother, which I've never heard before, some of the first ones. So I'll need to get a playlist of some of the new songs so I can look them up on YouTube or Spotify. Thank you so much. It was wonderful singing. And it really set the mood. So today, I'll be talking about my new book. It's a little book called Karma and Rebirth in Hinduism. I want to give some background on it first and why you might find it of interest. First of all, it's a small book. I'm not used to writing small books. I'm used to writing larger books, longer books. But there was a strict word limit. Cambridge University Press, who's my publisher, they told me maximum of 30,000 words, not one word more than 30,000. And for any writer out there, you'll know 30,000 words is not very much. It's a small book. They did it on purpose. The idea is this is part of a series, a book series called Cambridge Elements in Global Philosophy of Religion. Okay? And basically the point is each book focuses on particular key topics within a particular religious tradition. And it's a kind of deep dive. You go really deeply into this one topic. And it's meant to be an academic book, which is at the same time an introductory overview, and it should be accessible to a broad audience. So it's a tall task. You have to write it in a way that's rigorous for scholars, but at the same time has a broader appeal. So I did my best. And the reason why I took up the assignment is because as a Hindu, I've believed in these doctrines of karma and rebirth for many years, but I never really had the opportunity to go really deeply, inquire really deeply into these doctrines. I've always had some doubts about these doctrines also, like for instance, okay, even if I believe in rebirth, who or what exactly is reborn? What is the reincarnating entity? This is one of many questions I had. So I thought this is a great opportunity to do research on the topic, get a deeper understanding of what these fundamental doctrines of Hinduism really mean, what they're about, okay? So I want to share with you today some of the things I learned. And I hope that you learned some new things about the doctrines of karma and rebirth as well. So another thing about the book, a little apology here. I had absolutely no say about the production aspect of the book, which means what? I didn't choose the cover because it's part of a series. Everything is kind of based on a certain format. They should have published, because it's such a small book, they should have published it as a smaller size book, and then it would have been more pocket size. The font is a little bit too small. I had no control over any of this. I'm sorry about that. If it were my hands, it would have been produced a little bit differently. But in any case, I only had control over the content, and I hope the content is good. And that's what we'll be talking about today, the content. So first of all, anytime somebody writes a book, the first question is, who is the book written for? Okay, so let me explain that first. I would suggest that there are three main groups of people that this book should appeal to. The first,
scholars and students. Because it's an academic book, it should appeal to scholars because I'm giving an overview of some of the main academic debates, main academic controversies about these two key doctrines of Hinduism, karma and rebirth. At the same time, I want the book to appeal to just any thoughtful Hindu anywhere in the world, whatever their academic background is, whatever their academic interest, it doesn't matter. And they fall into two different categories. One of them is they're already Hindu, they already believe in the doctrines. But even for them, I think the book has a lot of value because it forces you to think more deeply about these doctrines. And within Hinduism, one of the big mistakes that some people make is to think that there is a single Hindu doctrine of karma and rebirth. In fact, Hinduism is a vast religion with many traditions within it. And you're going to find that if you go a little bit deeply into the literature, that different Hindu traditions explain these doctrines in subtly different ways. And my book gives a little bit of a taste of some of the nuances within Hindu traditions about these doctrines. So that should help everybody. And also, why should we as spiritual aspirants care about these doctrines? How does it impact our day-to-day spiritual life? This is a very important question. Even if we accept them theoretically, it's just, for many Hindus, it's like, yeah, I believe in karma and rebirth. And then they go about their daily life. How does it directly affect your daily life? How should it transform your attitude? How should it change your life? If you really believe in the doctrines, I also want to touch on that toward the end of the talk. But there's a third category, there's three, a third group that this book should appeal to, which is people who are very skeptical of these doctrines. People who are either atheist, agnostic, they can be religious, like in other traditions that don't believe in karma and rebirth, but for whatever reason, these are people who are reluctant to accept the truth of these doctrines, okay? There may be some Hindus also who are skeptical of rebirth. Just as an example, many of you have read the Kathamrita, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna in some language. The author of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he had a kind of Western style education. He was highly educated, very rational. And when he first met Sri Ramakrishna in the first few months, he was very skeptical of karma and rebirth. So he asked Sri Ramakrishna, I don't really believe in these doctrines of karma and rebirth. Will that harm my faith? Will it harm me in any way not to believe in these doctrines? And Sri Ramakrishna said, don't worry. It won't harm you, but never for a moment say that my views alone are right and your views are wrong. Other people's views are wrong. Don't become fanatical, one-sided, arrogant about your views. Be open to changing. And then what happened? If you look at the whole gospel, within a few years, M's views changed and he fully accepted karma and rebirth. So everybody grows in their own way. So this book also is meant to appeal to people who are skeptical of these doctrines, okay? Because one of the reasons why I took on the assignment is because even though this is meant to be an introductory book, it wasn't a kind of dry introduction. I wouldn't have accepted the assignment. I don't like writing encyclopedia articles. It's not really fun for me. The publishers encouraged me to be argumentative. They wanted me to take an argumentative stand. And so my argument in this book, my main argument in the book, is that it is reasonable to believe in the doctrines of karma and rebirth. Okay? I'm looking at the arguments for rebirth and karma, against karma and rebirth, and then I'm arguing that, on balance, it's reasonable to believe in these doctrines. So many of you, even if you believe in the doctrines, how many of you have thought deeply about why these doctrines are true? Right? What are the best arguments in favor of the doctrines? What are some of the main objections against these arguments? They may occur to you, right? Why is the human population increasing and how do you reconcile it with the doctrines of karma and rebirth? This is one of the common objections. And there are many objections like that. So I talk about those things as well. So let me first give a brief overview of some of the main chapters. So this book is divided into 5 chapters. The first chapter is Karma and Rebirth in the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, okay? I talk about some of the earliest Hindu scriptures that talk about these doctrines of karma and rebirth. And some of you who are familiar with the Upanishads will know that two of the oldest Upanishads are Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad and the Chandogya Upanishad, okay? So these are the earliest Hindu scriptures talking about karma and rebirth. And then in Bhagavad Gita, you find it all over the place. I started this talk with a beautiful verse from chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, talking about karma and rebirth. Okay, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. So I'm not going to talk about that first chapter today because I don't have time. Second chapter, nuances of karma and rebirth in classical and modern Hindu traditions. Okay, this is one of the longest chapters in the book, and I think it's a very important chapter. As I said, one of the biggest mistakes that some people make is to have a monolithic understanding of the Hindu doctrines of karma and rebirth. Monolithic, M-O-N-O-L-I-T-H-I-C. What does it mean? It means thinking that there is a single doctrine of karma and rebirth in Hinduism, but it's not true. And what I point out, what I highlight in chapter 2 of this book is there is a diversity of views about karma and rebirth within Hinduism. There's so many different philosophical traditions within Hinduism, and they have different views on so many questions. And I'll be talking about some of these key questions, okay? And some of the different Hindu views on these topics. And then you can ask yourself, what view do I like? And then you can accept that, right? But first you have to know the whole range of views within Hinduism. Chapter 3 is called Arguments in Support of Karma and Rebirth. And I talk about 6 main arguments. Today in the talk, I don't have time to talk about all 6. I'll mention a few of them, okay? Chapter 4, Arguments Against Karma and Rebirth. And I look at some of the most powerful objections against karma and rebirth. And again, I don't have time to talk about all of them. I think I talk about 5 objections in the book. I might talk about 1 or 2 of them, okay, to give you a taste. And then I have to leave something out so that you still are inspired to buy the book. And then chapter 5, the relevance of karma and rebirth to debates in contemporary philosophy. This is a brief chapter, again, because of this 30,000 word limit. I would have gone on a little bit in a little bit more detail, but I couldn't. So here I explain why these doctrines of karma and rebirth are important to contemporary philosophical debates. And there are a lot of different topics that it's relevant to, like consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness that a lot of people are talking about. I don't talk about it here because I don't have time. But one of the topics I talk about is environmental ethics, some of the arguments in favor of vegetarianism, for instance, which is one of the topics that you find in books like Manusmriti, one of the main Hindu scriptures, using the doctrines of karma and rebirth, and so on, okay? So that's a brief overview of the main 5 chapters in the book. Now, I want to begin the main talk, and I want to cover 4 main topics here. First, I want to raise 6 important questions about karma and rebirth. Some of them I can guarantee you probably thought about, but I bet that you haven't thought about all the answers to these questions, okay? So these are some very intuitive questions that come into people's minds when they think about the Hindu doctrines of karma and rebirth. So that's number 1. Number 2, what are some of the main arguments in support of karma and rebirth? Number 3, what are some of the main arguments against karma and rebirth? And if we believe in these doctrines, how do we respond to these objections? And then 4th and finally, because at the end of the day, we're sitting here because we're spiritual aspirants. Many of us are Bhaktas of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swamiji. So we want to know, okay, Maharaj, but why is this relevant to us? How does it help us in our day-to-day lives as householders, mostly raising children, going to work, and so on and so forth? How does it help us? So I want to touch on that as well, the practical relevance. So let's begin. The 6 key questions. The doctrine of karma is, in its essence, the principle that we reap what we sow. Fundamentally, the doctrine of karma means we reap what we sow. We get what we deserve, okay? But the first question, how exactly do we reap what we sow? This might seem like a very elementary question. You might think I know the answer, but it's not so simple. How exactly do we reap what we sow according to the doctrine of karma? And according to Hindu texts, Hindu figures, you're going to find 2 different answers to this question, okay? One I would call the metaphysical explanation of how we reap what we sow. The second is a psychological explanation of how we reap what we sow. So let me explain both of them. The first one I think is more common within Hinduism, the metaphysical explanation. What is the idea? I do a good action. What's a good action? Something that's unselfish, something that helps other people, something that I do without any selfish motive. What happens as a result? That good action generates what's called punya. Punya can be translated as karmic merit, okay? It's a metaphysical quantity. This is not something that you can perceive with your senses. That's why I call it a metaphysical explanation, okay? It's not something you can observe under a microscope, this quantity of punya, but it exists. Because of that punya, later in this life or in a future life, I will be I will enjoy favorable circumstances. I'll be born into favorable circumstances in my next life and so on. I will have positive experiences and I'll continue my spiritual journey. If I do a bad action, a selfish action, it generates what's called papa, which is, I think the wrong translation would be sin. It's not sin, it's karmic demerit. That's the more precise translation. Karmic demerit, D-E-M-E-R-I-T. Because of that karmic demerit, in the future I will experience something negative. I will experience unfavorable circumstances, either later in this life or in a future birth. Okay? This, in a nutshell, is the metaphysical explanation of how we reap what we sow. It involves these metaphysical quantities or units of papa and punya, karmic merit and karmic demerit. Okay? Now, there is a completely different psychological explanation, which I bet some of you have not thought about necessarily. But it's one that Swami Medhanandaji also emphasizes. He accepts the metaphysical explanation. He also emphasizes the psychological explanation. You'll find it in Raja Yoga, for instance, his book Raja Yoga. Now, let's use the same example. I do a good action. What happens as a result? It creates positive samskaras, latent mental impressions in my mind, in my unconscious. That's why I call it a psychological explanation. This is now, it operates at the level of the human mind. Nothing metaphysical. It creates imprints in the mind in the form of good samskaras. Now what happens as a result? Those good samskaras lead to good habits. It's going to make me more prone to engaging in the same kind of behavior in the future. The moment that samskara gets triggered or activated by some external stimulus, I'll have that impulse to do good actions again. And ultimately, Swami Vivekananda asks, what is character? Character is nothing but a bundle of habits. It's a beautiful definition of character. So if I have many good habits, I'll have a good character. If I engage in bad habits, I'll ultimately have a bad character. If I have both good and bad habits, I'll have a mixed character, some good qualities and some bad qualities. So what Swami Vivekananda says is, we can reform our characters. How do we do that? By countering our bad habits with good habits. That's the beauty of it. None of us is fated to be good or bad, anything like that. Not like that. We can change our entire life. We can transform our lives by changing our habits. Okay, that's the power of habit, actually. And then if we have a good character, so notice it's a kind of a cycle here, a psychological cycle. Because now, from a good character will only flow good actions. From a bad character will typically flow bad actions, right? But even if you have a bad character, you can force yourself with great difficulty to do good things, and then you can slowly change your habits and make them good. And then you'll develop a better character. That's the idea. So this whole thing that I'm explaining is a psychological explanation of how we reap what we sow. You see, we're not bringing in anything metaphysical like papa, punya, and so on. Now the next question is, well, which one should we accept? Which one is true? So the thing is, within Hinduism, you'll find many traditions say both are true. They're not conflicting. We can accept both the metaphysical explanation based on papa and punya. We can accept the psychological explanation based on samskaras, latent mental impressions. And they're complementary. Now, if you go a little bit more deeply, what you'll find is some Hindu traditions emphasize one rather than the other. Or they will collapse one into the other, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. They believe in papa and punya, but they'll explain papa and punya in terms of the psychological model. So what they're doing, what Patanjali is doing in the Yoga Sutras, if some of you are familiar with Yoga Sutra, and you look at carefully the karma and rebirth, how Patanjali understands it, what you'll find is he explains karma and rebirth in terms of the psychological model, in terms of samskaras. And he doesn't really bring in the metaphysical side of things, as far as I can tell, in that way, okay? Or it's kind of a mix of both. So, but Swami Vivekananda, for instance, he seemed to have accepted both. Sri Ramakrishna accepted both the psychological and the metaphysical explanation. But I bet many of you were not able to clearly distinguish these two different ways of understanding how we reap what we sow, right? So that's one of the things I explain in detail in chapter 2 of the book, okay? Okay, now, next big question. This follows directly from the previous question. What I just explained, that could be nice, but now the problem is, how do we get out of this cycle of karma and rebirth? Because even if I do a good action, I still seem to be stuck. I'm still stuck in the same cycle. I'll still be reborn. If I do good actions, I'll be born into good circumstances, but I'll still be reborn. How the heck do we get out of the cycle? It's a fundamental question. What's funny is, in the course of my research, I found finding the answer to this question is not as easy as you might think within the literature. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book, actually. Because the highest goal, according to Hinduism, is liberation, moksha. How do we get out of rebirth, the cycle of rebirth? The answer is, as far as I can tell, and you'll find in the Gita, but it's a little bit hidden. You have to do some research to find the answer. The answer is, everything depends on your motives for acting. You have to inspect your motives. So if you engage in good actions, even if they're good actions, if you have selfish motives for engaging in the good actions, what will happen? You'll be stuck in the cycle. But if you engage in the same good action without any selfish motives, what happens? You'll purify the mind, and ultimately you'll make progress toward liberation. Let me give you a simple example. I'm a high school student, and I start working in a soup kitchen, serving the poor and the needy. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Yes, it's a nice thing. But what's my motive? Now, one student might have the motive of adding a nice line to their resume. And then they can also add a nice fat paragraph in their statement of purpose, or their, what do you call it? I think it's called a statement of purpose, this college essay. And they could say, and they'll make these dramatic stories about how this one person came in, he was homeless, and I served him soup, and that person, brought a smile to that person's face. And then they get into their dream school, one of those prestigious East Coast colleges here. Now, there's a little bit of a selfish motive, right? So if you engage in a good action, but with a selfish motive, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but what's going to happen is it will result in positive circumstances in the future, but it's not going to help you toward liberation. Now imagine I do exactly the same thing externally. I go to the same soup kitchen, I serve the same needy people and so on, but I have no selfish motives. My only motive is to serve. And I do it as an offering to the divine, as karma yoga. Then what happens? The result is purification of mind. And a secondary result may be also good karma, but it's a side effect. That's not what my main aim in engaging in good actions. You see? And I have Sarvapayanji to thank for this subtle point, actually. I shared with him a small part of my book, and he made this suggestion. He said, see, in some traditions, and he's thinking especially of Advaita Vedanta, and he gave me the textual reference from Vedanta Sara. Even when we engage in a good action without selfish motives, there is what's called avantara phalam, which means secondary results. The primary result is chitta shuddhi, you purify your mind. But as a secondary result, you also get the good karma. So it's 2 for the price of 1. Right? So you get both. Okay. So inspect your motives. We have to be very careful as spiritual aspirants. It's not good enough to just focus on the externals. I'm doing something externally very good. I'm doing a lot of japa. What's your motive for doing japa? I'm doing puja. What's your motive? I'm singing these songs. Are you singing for God, or are you singing to get the recognition and praise of other people in the room? So as spiritual aspirants, we have to be very, very careful about looking within and asking the hard questions, which we don't like to ask. Sri Ramakrishna used to warn us about ego again and again, even in the spiritual context, especially in the context of karma yoga. He said, you don't know where egoism can creep in. So we have to be very, very careful about that. So that's the idea. Okay, so that's the second question. How exactly do we attain liberation? And the answer is, engage in good actions without any selfish motives. Then it leads to purification of mind, and then ultimately we'll attain God realization and liberation. Okay? Third big question. I bet it's occurred to many of you. Okay, I believe in karma, I believe in rebirth, but who is reborn? Who exactly is reborn? This is not at all an easy question to answer within Hinduism. It's no joke. And what you'll find if you go really deeply into the literature is that within Hinduism, there are different answers to this question. Different Hindu traditions will give different answers to this question. And briefly, I'll just explain some of the main answers. Nyaya, the logical school of Indian philosophy, which some of you may not even have heard of, they give the answer of the Atman. They say it's the Atman. It's the individual soul which reincarnates from birth to birth. Okay, seems like a very logical thing. Another school of Hinduism called Sankhya. It's one of the oldest schools of Indian philosophy, Sankhya. And if you know something about yoga philosophy, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, that's based on Sankhya. Okay, the even older school of Sankhya. What is Sankhya's answer to the question of who or what reincarnates? The answer is the subtle body. Sukshma Sharira or Linga Sharira. That's a Sanskrit term for the subtle body. Not the Atman, it's a subtle body. Why? It'll take some time to explain it. I don't want to get into the metaphysical complexities here. But the point is, according to Sankhya, the soul, the Purusha, is never subject to karma, to rebirth. It's eternally free, Nitya Mukta. So that cannot be the reincarnating entity. So it has to be something on the side of Prakriti, on the side of nature. So the subtle body, what is the subtle body, by the way? It's the mind. The subtle body is the mind. And it's a subtle form of matter, actually. It's insentient. Okay, according to Sankhya itself, the mind is insentient. What's conscious is the Purusha. But the Purusha is not subject to rebirth. The Purusha is eternally liberated on the one side. And on the other side, you have the subtle body, which is reincarnating, but it's insentient. So now there's a serious question. How in the world can something insentient be subject to rebirth? Like a rock, just imagine. Does it make sense to say that a rock is reborn? It's weird. It should be a conscious entity that's reborn, right? So now comes the Vedantic answer. The Vedantic answer, you'll find in the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, in many places. The reincarnating entity, according to all the traditions of Vedanta, is the Jivatma, the individual soul, the conscious individual soul, in association with the subtle body. Jivatma plus subtle body. That's the full answer, the Vedantic answer to the question of the reincarnating entity. It's not just the Jivatma. Why is it not just the Jivatma? Because then where are the samskaras kept? See, everything we do produces samskaras. I explained that in the psychological explanation. But where are they stored? They're stored in the subtle body, in the mind. So in chapter 15 of the Gita, Bhagavan Krishna explains this very clearly. At the time of death, the Jivatma leaves the physical body and takes along with it the subtle body, the mana. Okay? So we need both. The reincarnating entity is both. And if you just take the subtle body, then it's insentient, like a stone. You need to have something that's conscious at the same time. That's the Jivatma. So the full Vedantic answer is Jivatma plus the subtle body. That is what reincarnates from birth to birth. And then you might ask, well, in the state of liberation, do we still have the Jivatma plus the subtle body? No. When you attain liberation, the subtle body dissolves, finally. But only when you attain liberation. So long as you have not attained liberation, we will keep being reborn as a Jivatma in association with the subtle body. Once we attain liberation, the subtle body dissolves, and we remain as conscious, eternal, individual souls. And then we have two choices. According to Sri Ramakrishna, he says we can either eat sugar or we can become sugar. Chini khete chao na hote chao. These are the two questions. So if you want to eat sugar, then you dwell in an eternal heaven with the personal God. And if you want to become sugar, if you're an Advaita Vedanta and a Buddhist, then fine. Then you say, I don't want to go to any heaven. I don't want to be an individual anymore. So fine. Then you can merge in non-dual Brahman, and then that's liberation for you. But both are fine. And there's no higher and lower. Okay? So that is the third question. Who or what reincarnates? The Vedantic answer is, we're sitting in Vedanta Society, so I'm emphasizing the Vedantic answer. Jivatma plus the subtle body. Now, fourth, very important question. What exactly is the overarching purpose of the law of karma? What's the point in all of this, from a spiritual standpoint? And there are two different answers. One of them is the most common understanding. If somebody asks you that question, what's the point of the law of karma? You might give this answer. The answer is, it's for reward and punishment. It's called the retributive understanding of karma. It's understood as retribution. I do something good, I'm rewarded for it. I do something bad, I'm punished for it. This is by far the most common understanding of the law of karma. If you look at popular TV shows, how they talk about karma, one example is The Big Bang Theory. How many of you have seen The Big Bang Theory? Yeah. So the Indian character used to visit our center. When I first came to Hollywood, he would come to my classes, Kunal Nair and his wife, Neha. And there's a funny scene in one episode where Leonard, the physicist, one of the physicists, he has a crush on Penny, his love interest, but he's a coward. So he's afraid to express his affection for her. And so she doesn't know he's interested, so she's dating somebody else. And he's jealous. And so he sabotages the Penny's date with this other guy. And he's feeling guilty about it. His conscience is pricking him. So he says that to Rajesh Kutrapalli, which is the Indian character on the show. So I'm feeling a little guilty about this. And then Rajesh says, of course you feel guilty. You've gotten a lot of bad karma because of this, because you've sabotaged Penny's date. And then he says, and because of that, in your next life, you're going to be reborn as a banana slug. And then Leonard gets frightened. So it's a very funny thing. And this is also very common. Is it possible to be born as a banana slug, as a bacteria, as a plant? Oh my goodness, it's terrifying. We'll get to that question in a second. So this is one of the common ways of understanding, and you'll find that kind of answer in some of the main Hindu texts. You're going to find it in Manusmriti, for instance. If you do a lot of bad things, you might be reborn as a banana slug, who knows? Okay, but there is a different answer to the question of what is the overarching purpose of the law of karma, which is, I think, a more lofty spiritual explanation, which Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Aurobindo, and other people defend and explain. Okay, it's what I call an evolutionary understanding of the law of karma. Evolutionary karma. What do I mean by that? What's the idea? The idea is that the overarching purpose of karma is to foster our moral and spiritual evolution, our moral and spiritual growth. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, "Lonka ke liye jhal lagbe na." If I eat a chili, won't my tongue burn? Won't your tongue burn? Of course it'll burn. But what's the purpose in my tongue burning? So I make a mistake, I reap the negative consequences, and then I learn from that mistake so that I won't commit it in the future. Oh, I eat that chili, now my tongue's burning. I'll try to avoid eating chilies in the future. You see? This is very close to home for me because whenever I travel, I send dietary requirements and I say, no spice, please. I gave a talk in Boston yesterday, and there's some kind devotees took me to an Indian restaurant yesterday. I specifically requested mild, and then it was still too spicy for me. So anyway, so I know very well this. If you eat a chili, won't your tongue burn? So yes, the tongue burns, but is that the main purpose of karma? No, it's not to punish us. We learn from the experience. Swami Vivekananda, one of the most powerful things he ever said, which I repeat to my students all the time at the two universities that I work at as a Hindu chaplain, USC and UCLA. Swami Vivekananda used to say, the secret of life is not enjoyment, but education through experience. We should try to learn from all our experiences. There's something to learn from every experience, whether positive or negative or neutral, there's something to learn. It's a growth opportunity. We should change our mindset as spiritual aspirants, whatever we're facing, no matter how seemingly tragic. Treat it as a learning opportunity, as a growth opportunity. What can we learn from this experience? What is God trying to teach me through this experience? It's not reward and punishment, it's our spiritual growth. So that's the evolutionary approach to karma. This is what I think our great tradition emphasizes. And I think it's a healthier spiritual way of thinking about the law of karma. Okay, so keep this in mind. When you think about karma, when people ask you, what's the point of karma? There's a reward and punishment way of explaining it. There's also an evolutionary way of explaining it, which I think is a more spiritual explanation. Okay. Fifth question, big one. This is one of these cans of worms that I'm going to just briefly open and then shut back up. Is karma compatible with free will? Okay. I've given separate lectures on free will and I've written about this. So it's a very complicated issue. I talk about it briefly in chapter 2 of my book, if you want some details. Now, within Hinduism, different Hindu figures give different answers to this question. And you might be surprised to know that our very own Swami Vivekananda, he explains the law of karma in a strictly deterministic way. He defends what I call karmic determinism, which means that the law of karma determines everything we do, everything we say, everything we think, down to the smallest detail. I lift up this bottle of water, that's determined by my karma. It's very interesting. And some of you may not even know this. You have to really read the entire complete works to see. And by the way, I'll just mention this. If you're interested and you have academic interest, there's a book coming out honoring the life and work of Arindam Chakraborty, a very well-known scholar of Indian philosophy. He's a friend of mine as well. So the book is called Thinking Without Borders, Essays in Honor of Arindam Chakraborty. It'll be published by Bloomsbury in early 2026. And they asked me to contribute a chapter. And so I thought it would be fun to critically engage Arindam's, Professor Chakraborty's work on free will, because he was a pioneer. Because he was as far as I'm aware, he was the first scholar to write about Sri Ramakrishna's and Swami Vivekananda's views on free will and determinism. And so I build on his work, and I also, of course, it's not fun unless you argue and disagree with these scholars. And so I've already written a separate article on Sri Ramakrishna's views on free will. And that's already published. You can find that on my website. But for this volume on Chakraborty, I've written an entire essay on Swami Vivekananda's views on free will and determinism, and I call his view karmic determinism. So that's coming out in a few months, and you can get that if you're interested. But that's not his complete view. He also adds, see, karmic determinism only applies to the body and to the mind. That's the only place where it has scope, really. But when we attain liberation, what we realize is we're different playful manifestations of the divine. Remember, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Vigyani dekhe Brahma Chaturvinshi Tattva hoyche, which means the Vigyani realizes that Divine Mother herself has become everything in this entire universe. All of us as individual souls are different manifestations of Divine Mother. And who is free if not Divine Mother? So Divine Mother alone is free. So to the extent that we can identify with divine consciousness, to that extent, we inherit the freedom of the divine. We're not free as egos, we're not free as body-mind complexes, but we're free as God. So that's the second side of their views, Sri Ramakrishna's view and Swami Vivekananda's view. Both are true. Karma determines everything we do at the level of body-mind, but we're free as God, as divine souls, okay? Now, that's only Swamiji's view. Now, there's a whole range of other views within Hinduism. If you look at Paramahamsa Yogananda's views, the Self-Realization Fellowship, he says we have limited free will. Okay, Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, he also says we have limited free will, and that the law of karma gives some scope for free will, but also constrains the bounds of our free will. So in our tradition, you'll often hear the analogy used of a cow tied to a post, which means what? The cow is free to roam within the radius of that rope, limited free will. What's interesting is, in the gospel, the Kathamrita, Dr. Sharkar, the rationally minded homeopathic doctor, was treating Sri Ramakrishna. He used this example in his debate with Girish Ghosh about free will, because Girish Ghosh is a staunch bhakta, and he thought that Sri Ramakrishna was Navatara, and he said God alone is a doer, so he's arguing with Dr. Sharkar. Dr. Sharkar's view is, we have limited free will, and he says, but look, the cow is tied to a post and is free to roam within the radius of the rope. Sri Ramakrishna listens to the conversation, and he says, hey, where did you hear that analogy of the cow and the post? Did you get it from some British textbook? That's what he asked. It's very interesting. He'd never heard of it. And he said, this is funny. This is not the Indian view. Then he says, when you have realized God, you realize that God alone is the doer. Many people make the mistake of thinking in our tradition that when people ask the question of do we have free will, they'll say that Sri Ramakrishna taught the cow and the post. Example. If you ask many monks, they'll give the cow and the post. I've seen this myself when you talk to monks about it. Why? The confusion comes from the fact that this cow and the post appears in two of the main texts in our tradition. This might take me in different directions, so I'll just say it very briefly here. One of the texts is gospel, I already mentioned the reference, but in the Leela Prasanga, Swami Sharananda's biography of Sri Ramakrishna, the reference comes again, but in a very different context, where Niranjananandaji and other direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna are debating about whether we have free will and how it impacts our sadhana. If we have no free will, then what's the point in all of this? In renouncing, in spiritual practice, everything is in God's hands. So Sri Ramakrishna hears this, and then he gives the example of the cow and the post. It's very interesting. The same example where in the gospel, he asked Dr. Sharkar, hey, where did you hear that? From an English textbook. He's using that example to teach his disciples. But then he says, when you realize the highest, you realize that God alone is a doer. So the position is consistent in the gospel and in the Leela Prasanga. But this is my take on how to reconcile the cow and the post in the gospel with the cow and the post in the Leela Prasanga, in Sri Ramakrishna's divine play. The way I see it is this. For some spiritual aspirants, it's either dangerous or not beneficial from a spiritual standpoint to believe that God alone is a doer. It's not encouraging. It knocks the wind out of your sails to believe that. For some people, okay? For them, the cow and the post is very useful to think that we have limited free will, okay? And we'll get more free will to the extent that we can purify our minds and realize God finally, okay? But there's another type of spiritual aspirant. I call them the Girish Ghosh type of spiritual aspirant. From the beginning, they're happy to think that God alone is a doer. You know, Sri Ramakrishna will give the example of the baby kitten. Meow, meow. You surrender. Now, it cannot be a perfect surrender until you realize God, but as a sadhaka, you find it beneficial. Ami Jontru Tumi Jontru, one of the great songs of Ram Prasad that Sri Ramakrishna loved to sing. I'm a mere instrument in your hands, O Lord. That means no free will. This is no cow. There's no cow and post here. God alone is the doer. For some people, they don't need to believe in cow and post and limited free will. So that's a matter of temperament. So Sri Ramakrishna, I believe, he noticed that some of his disciples would benefit from believing in limited free will, even though from the ultimate standpoint, he knew that God alone is the doer. But for other people like Girish Ghosh, God alone is the doer, right? You don't need to bring in the cow and the post. Okay, so anyway, that's a big detour. And now I'm going to shut that can of worms again. And if you have questions in the Q&A, you can feel free to ask me. Okay, now I've covered 5 big questions. Now the 6th question I want to address, the banana slug question. Is it possible for us as human beings to be reborn as a lower being, either a dog or a cat or a lobster or a eucalyptus tree or a banana slug? Is it possible? Here again, what you'll find is there's a wide range of answers to this question within Hinduism. Some of you might not know this. And I want to just make the point in a very dramatic way by saying, even within our Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition, there are different answers to the question. I don't know how many of you know this. Swami Vivekananda, let's see what's his answer. Somebody asked him point blank, is it possible for a human being to be reborn as a lower animal in his next birth? He says, of course. If you behave like a beast, you might be born as a beast. Simple. So he says, this is actually a very widespread view within Hinduism. Okay? Swami Medhanandaji, another direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he wrote several books on karma and rebirth. His answer is exactly the opposite of Swami Vivekananda. He says, it is not possible to regress from a human birth to a non-human animal birth or to a plant birth. He says it's not possible. So even within our tradition, there's a dispute between Swami Medhanandaji and Swami Vivekananda, right? I bet many of you didn't even know this, but it's very interesting. So now, which one do we accept? The one you like, who cares? It's not. So don't worry about it. Just accept the one that you find more rational, more reasonable, more helpful for your spiritual life. I see this as a virtue of Hinduism, that there's so many answers to these questions. It can be confusing, but the beauty of it is, unlike some other religions, it's not a one-size-fits-all religion that says you have to believe X, Y, and Z. No, take your pick. I like the evolutionary idea of karma, so take it. I like the idea of the jivatma and the subtle body reincarnating together, so take it. I like the idea that it's not possible to regress from a human birth because it's discouraging to think I don't want to live in fear that I might be reborn as a plant. Oh, I don't accept it. Accept Medhanandaji's view. So see, you mix and match, you accept what you like. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Whatever helps you to make spiritual progress. This is what Sri Ramakrishna emphasized again and again. Am kiteshu am kao. If you come to a mango grove, eat the mangoes. Don't obsess so much about the leaves and the counting how many leaves there are in the branches and so on. Okay? Okay, so there's a lot more to it. If you want the details, look at chapter 2 of the book. And as was mentioned earlier, there are limited copies, so grab your copy quickly and then I can also sign it. So now, chapter 3. In chapter 3 of the book, I talk about 6 main arguments in support of karma and rebirth. There's no way that I can discuss all 6 of them here because I'm already, how much time do I have? Where's Devashishi?
12:40.
Okay, so I have 15 minutes. Okay, fine. So I'll adjust accordingly. So maybe I'll talk about 1 or 2 main arguments in support of karma and rebirth. The first one, this is one of these trending arguments now. There's a researcher at the University of Virginia named Jim Tucker, who's done really interesting work in this area. He's looked at American children who claim to have memories of their past life. And he's written big books on this. And one of the books that I'd recommend is called Before, Children's Memories of Past Lives. You can get from Amazon quite cheaply. And I'll give you one example. James Leininger is a young kid at the age of 2. He has these recurring nightmares. And he says things like, plane on fire, plane's crashing, mayday, mayday, things like that. And his parents finally ask him, what are you shouting about at night? And he says, oh, I was a pilot in my last birth. In World War II, I was fighting in Japan, and my plane was shot down by the Japanese. My aircraft carrier was called Natoma, N-A-T-O-M-A. He gave out, and my name was so-and-so, I think Jack Larson or something. And his father was astonished. This is pre-Google, because when he was 2, it was like 20 years ago or something. So he goes to the history books, to libraries, and he finds in the history books about World War II that there was a guy with that name that the boy mentioned, who belonged to the USS aircraft carrier in Natoma Bay, that had a friend with so-and-so name that he also confirmed. His plane was shot down by the Japanese during World War II. So he corroborated the details. And so there are these fascinating cases of these children whose reports of past life memories have been confirmed, verified by other people. Okay, so this is becoming a growing and a very strong source of evidence for karma and rebirth. So I encourage you to look into more detail on those kinds of things. Another argument is what's called the argument from samskaras, the argument from latent mental impressions. Swami Vivekananda, building on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra 3.18, he defends this argument. He says, each experience that we have comes in the form of a wave in the chitta, and this subsides and becomes finer and finer, but is never lost. This idea of samskara. It remains there in minute form. And if we can bring this wave up again, it becomes memory. So, if the yogi can make a sanyama means concentrate intensely on that samskara. If we can make a sanyama on these past impressions in the mind, he will begin to remember all his past lives. The idea is that everything we've ever done in all of our lifetimes is stored in the unconscious in the form of samskaras. Which means that if we concentrate on our past life samskaras, we'll regain our memories of those past lives. And there's a whole field now called past life regression hypnosis. Some of you might be aware of this. And there was a monk in our order who had my name, Swami Medhanandaji. Now he's Peter because he left the order. And now guess what he does? He's a past life regression hypnotist, which is just a random fact. Anyway, it's kind of interesting. Okay, so and there's a book on this if you're interested. It's called Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss, W-E-I-S-S. I recommend the book. It's very interesting. And he was a psychiatrist, atheist, didn't believe in karma or rebirth, and he had this patient who suddenly started talking about her past lives, and his whole thinking started changing. It's a fascinating book, and I recommend it. Anyway, that's another argument for karma and rebirth. Any of us, by practicing this yogic technique of sanyama, we can concentrate on our past life samskaras and regain memories of our past lives. So we can check it out for ourselves. Now, should we all run out and try to do this? No. There's a good reason why most of us don't have memories of our past lives, and we'll get to that in a second. Okay, that's one of the objections to karma and rebirth. We'll talk about that. Okay, now there's many more arguments. I only talked about two briefly. Look at chapter 3 of my book for more details. Now, objections. What are some of the main objections to karma and rebirth? I'll mention just a couple. One, the lack of memory objection. If it's true that we had past lives, why the heck don't we have memories of our past lives? There might be some few people here and there who claim to have some memories when they're young, but why don't we? Most of us in the room have no idea what we did in our past life. Why? Hindus give 3 main responses. Number 1, just because we don't have memory of something doesn't mean that we didn't exist at that time. What's an example? Some people have amnesia, which makes them forget what they did. They might even forget their own name. Doesn't mean that they don't exist or that they forget that they're married to somebody or that they have children. Does it mean that none of that happened? No. How many of us remember anything from when we were 3 weeks old? None of us, I assume. Does that mean that we didn't exist when we were a 3-week-old baby? No, we existed. So that's the first kind of response. Just because we don't have memories of something doesn't mean that we didn't exist at that time, that we didn't have past lives. Okay? Number 2, thank God we don't have memories of our past lives. This is the second line of response. Sister Nivedita once asked Swami Vivekananda toward the end of his life. She said, why is it that we don't have memories of our past lives? He quotes Jesus, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. We've done enough stupid things in this lifetime. And we already feel guilty for what the dumb things we've done. Let alone if we had to know what we did in our past lives, oh my goodness, we'd become emotional basket cases. We wouldn't be able to move forward in our life. We'd be burdened with the psychological baggage, emotional baggage of everything we did in our past life. So God, in her infinite wisdom, has withheld from us knowledge of our past lives until it's necessary for us. Okay, and then third, this is just another little interesting thing, is that Swami Vivekananda adds, in our last birth, in our final birth, before liberation, we'll regain our memories of our past lives. Because at that point, we're emotionally and spiritually ready to assimilate that information. And great gurus, they often have knowledge of their own past lives and of the past lives of their disciples. Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, they could touch somebody or just see somebody and immediately know what they did in their past life and guide them accordingly. That's useful if you're a guru, for instance. Okay, but most of us is not necessary, and let's not, curiosity killed the cat. So unless there's For some people, past life regression hypnosis might help, especially if you have some kind of deep trauma. Some people who have deep traumas, it might help them to regress to a past life where they can identify the source of that trauma. Some people are born with it, they're terrified of water, any kind of water. Why? Maybe because in their past life they drowned, right? You can identify the source, and then what happens, the moment you recognize the source of that trauma, the trauma starts to dissolve. So there's a kind of therapeutic value potentially in past life, in having knowledge of your past lives in that way. Okay, one more objection I'll mention briefly, and then I want to get to the practical value of karma and rebirth, and then I can take questions. This is another very common objection, the population explosion objection. Okay? The human population has been increasing for many, many centuries now, right? Just in the past 50 years, the human population has almost exponentially increased. If that's the case, where in the world are all these souls coming from to inhabit these souls, to inhabit these human bodies? Where are they coming from? And there's a simple two-fold answer, two-pronged answer from a Hindu standpoint. Number one, remember that souls inhabit not only human bodies, but also the bodies of non-human animals and plants. Okay? And Swami Vivekananda himself says, this is a direct quotation, it is a significant fact that as the human population is increasing, the animal population is decreasing. The animal souls are all becoming men, meaning human beings. Now, how he could know that, I don't know if he did all the field research, but this is a theoretical possibility. Where are the souls coming from? From non-human animal bodies and from the bodies of, not bodies, but from plant beings, plant species, right? Second part of the answer, this is not the only loka. This is not the only realm in which there are souls, the earth, the bhuloka. There are temporary heavens where you reap good karma, you exhaust your good karma, and then you come back to this earth. There are temporary hells. If you do a lot of bad things, like a Hitler or something, he might go to a temporary hell, and then he's going to have to come back in another body and then try again. There's so many lokas where souls reside, Pitri Loka, there's so many. So the souls can also be coming from other lokas to inhabit these extra human bodies, okay? So that's a twofold Hindu response to the population explosion objection. Now, I'm gonna skip to just some of the practical implications, okay? Because at the end of the day, philosophy is good, clarity is good, it's helpful in our spiritual life. It gives us a kind of framework for our spiritual practice. But ultimately, we have to practice, right? So even if, after considering all these arguments for and against karma and rebirth, okay, Maharaj, yes, I accept these doctrines. But why should it, how does it help me in my day-to-day life? In my day-to-day struggle as a householder, raising children, arguing with my spouse, paying the bills, how does it help me? Being stuck in rush hour traffic. Here, I've been driven around by several people, and when I was picked up from the airport, there was a lot of traffic, and he said he apologized.